The winds on Aurelius Prime were vicious, slicing through the canyon ridges like knives. Callan Rourke pressed himself against the jagged rock wall, feeling every tremor as small meteor shards pounded the surface around him. He had grown used to the planet's hostility, but nothing could erase the edge of fear when the storms came. The colony was abandoned by the core worlds, left to survive on its own, and each day was a fight against the land, predators, and the occasional raider gang. Callan had learned to move quickly and think fast. He kept his tools close, strapped to his belt, and his eyes constantly scanned the shifting shadows of the canyon. Today he had a simple task: retrieve spare energy cells from a ruined outpost 3 kilometers down the ridge. It should have been routine, but the crackle of the wind and the groaning rock made him uneasy. As he moved carefully along a narrow ledge, something strange caught his eye. A shimmer in the dust, almost like a tiny flicker of color, danced near a pile of broken rocks. He froze, listening. There it was again, a sharp, urgent cry, high-pitched and trembling. Callan's brow furrowed. He had heard the legends of dragons on this planet, stories from older settlers who claimed the creatures had once guarded humanity long ago, but no one had seen one in generations. The cry came again, closer this time, filled with fear. Callan's heart beat faster. He had 2 choices: keep his mission and ignore the sound, or investigate. Curiosity and instinct won. He crept toward the noise, keeping low, gripping his utility knife. Under a broken slab of rock he found it. A tiny dragon hatchling, no bigger than a human child, its scales glowing faintly like molten metal. Its wings were crumpled against its body, and one of its front legs was trapped under a jagged stone. It looked at Callan with wide, terrified eyes. The hatchling shivered and let out another sharp squeal. Callan felt a strange pull in his chest. Fear aside, he could not leave it there. He knelt and gently lifted the rock, wincing as it cut into his hands. The hatchling flinched but did not bite. Callan muttered softly, "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The little dragon nuzzled his hand cautiously. There was something alive in those eyes: intelligence, awareness, and fear. Callan had never seen anything like it. Suddenly, a deep rumble shook the canyon. Callan's stomach dropped. He turned his head just in time to see a streak of blue fire streak across the sky. A torpedo, plasma-charged, fast and deadly, hurtled toward the ridge above him. The air shimmered with heat and rocks began to fall. Callan acted without thinking. He grabbed the hatchling and threw himself over it, using his body as a shield. The blast hit the ledge with a deafening roar. Hot shards of rock and plasma tore through the air. Pain exploded along Callan's side, and his ears rang, but he did not release the dragon. His mind screamed at him to survive, but more than that, to protect this fragile life. When the dust settled, Callan blinked against the smoke. The hatchling had survived, trembling but alive. Its glowing scales dimmed slightly, but it seemed alert, peering at him with a curious tilt of its head. Callan sat back, exhausted, feeling the ache in his body, the burn on his skin. He had no time to rest. Something about the hatchling told him this was bigger than himself, bigger than survival. From the ridge above, a shadow moved. Callan stiffened. He did not recognize it at first, a figure in black armor, moving with purpose. Raiders? Or someone else entirely? His grip tightened on the hatchling. They could not find him now. If they saw it, they would try to take it. The dragon's survival depended on him, and he understood that every choice now carried weight. He glanced around the canyon. There were narrow paths, crumbling ledges, and vents that released scalding steam. Aurelius Prime was merciless, but it also offered tools. Callan's mind raced. He could use the terrain to hide, to mislead any pursuer. Every rock, every ridge, every gust of wind was a weapon or a shield. The hatchling shifted in his arms, making a soft, almost human-like whimper. Callan whispered, "You're safe, for now. But we have to move." He stood, his body aching, and took the first cautious steps along a thin ledge that led deeper into the canyon. Each movement required careful calculation. One slip and they would fall into the jagged cliffs below. A distant boom echoed and dust cascaded down the walls. Callan's stomach clenched. Whatever had fired the torpedo was still out there. They were not safe yet. But he had made a choice, and he would not abandon the hatchling. In that moment he realized something profound. Courage was not the absence of fear, but acting in spite of it. Protecting this creature meant risking everything. His life, his mission, his future, but he had decided that some lives were worth more than his own safety. The hatchling nuzzled closer, almost sensing his determination. Callan's pulse steadied. They would move and they would survive. But he knew this was only the beginning. The moment he stepped into the deeper shadows of the canyon, He felt the weight of unseen eyes, and a growing sense that the danger was far from over. And then, somewhere above the ridge, a metallic screech cut through the air, mechanical wings moving fast, hunting. Callan froze. The hatchling whimpered again. They were not alone. Someone, or something, was coming for them. Callan hugged the hatchling closer as he scrambled along the canyon's narrow ledge. Every step was perilous, jagged rocks jutted like teeth, and the wind threatened to push him off balance. The screech of metal wings echoed above, sharp and unrelenting. Whoever, or whatever, was following them moved fast, relentless. Callan's mind raced. There was no time for hesitation. He ducked into a small alcove hidden beneath a crumbling overhang. The hatchling, trembling in his arms, let out a soft hiss, its tiny claws pressing against his chest. "Shoo, it's okay," Callan whispered, breathing hard. His heart pounded. They had survived the blast, but now a different danger loomed. This canyon was a maze of death, and the hunters above had the advantage of speed, precision, and weapons. He did not. Callan scanned the area quickly. The alcove was shallow, offering little protection from aerial attackers. But he noticed something else, a series of narrow tunnels leading deeper into the canyon. They were old, likely part of a core world mining system, overgrown and unstable. It was risky, but the tunnels might hide them from the winged hunters. He pressed the hatchling gently to his chest and moved toward the nearest entrance, testing the rock under his feet. Inside, the tunnels were dark and damp. Stalactites hung like spears from the ceiling, and the floor was slick with mineral deposits. Callan's boots slipped once and he cursed under his breath, steadying himself. The hatchling squirmed, startled, but Callan held firm. He whispered again, "We'll be safe, for now. Just keep moving." The first challenge came almost immediately. A collapsed section of the tunnel blocked their path. Rocks and debris formed a jagged wall, impossible to climb without risking injury. Callan's mind worked fast. He checked his pack and found a few explosive charges he had scavenged for emergencies. He set them carefully, timing the detonation to push the rocks just enough to create a small gap, wide enough to crawl through. The blast echoed through the canyon, sending tremors along the walls, but it worked. They crawled through, the hatchling clinging to his chest, tiny claws digging into his shirt. Callan's breath was ragged. Every nerve was alert, anticipating danger from above or around every corner. The sound of the metallic wings had faded slightly, but that did not ease him. Aurelius Prime was full of predators, mechanical or natural, and the slightest mistake could mean death. As they moved deeper, Callan spotted a faint glimmer in the walls, geothermal vents releasing scalding steam in bursts. An idea sparked. If he could channel the hatchling's small flame in sync with the vents, they could create a screen of heat and smoke, masking their trail. Callan had always been good with machines, but improvising with living energy was different. He knelt, placing the hatchling near a vent. Lumer's scales shimmered, and the little dragon hissed, sensing the heat. "Come on, we can do this," Callan murmured. Slowly, the hatchling released a controlled flicker of flame. The combination of fire and steam created a wall of swirling mist, thick and blinding. They slipped through unnoticed, leaving only faint tracks. Callan's muscles burned, but he felt a surge of pride. The hatchling, tiny and fragile, had responded to his direction, almost as if it understood the stakes. Callan realized then that survival was not just about strength, it was about intelligence, adaptability, and trust. But the canyon offered no true respite. As they emerged into a wider section, he saw movement in the shadows. Scavenger patrols, armed with makeshift rifles and plasma pistols. They paused, noticing the flicker of the hatchling's scales. Callan's heart sank. If they saw Lumer, they would attack immediately. He pressed the hatchling into his chest and sprinted toward a narrow side path, firing a small flare into the shadows to misdirect the patrol. The scavengers hesitated, confused, giving Callan a precious few seconds. He zigzagged through the jagged rock formations, using the canyon's natural barriers to shield them. One of the patrols fired, the plasma bolt sizzling past him, missing by inches. The hatchling whimpered. Callan's chest tightened with guilt and fear. Each step was a gamble, but he would not abandon this creature. Not now, not ever. Hours passed, though they felt like minutes. Callan found a shallow cave system, half-collapsed but defensible. He crouched inside, exhausted, and finally allowed himself a moment to assess the hatchling. Lumer was curled against his chest, breathing in rapid, shallow bursts. Callan smiled despite his fatigue. "We made it this far," he said softly. "But it's not over. Not by a long shot." As he lay there, listening to the faint hum of the wind outside and the distant echoes of pursuit, Callan realized the truth. This hatchling was more than a life to protect. Lumber held secrets humanity had forgotten, powers long lost, and the hunters chasing them knew it. Their survival would require more than courage, it would require ingenuity, quick thinking, and every ounce of determination Callan could muster. Then a low, metallic screech pierced the cave's mouth. Callan froze. Someone, or something, was closing in again. He tightened his grip on the hatchling, feeling the warmth of its scales against his chest, and whispered, "We'll face it. Together." The hatchling blinked at him, almost knowingly, as if it understood the promise. And somewhere in the shadows, the sound of boots and wings grew closer, a chilling reminder that the trials had only just begun. Callan pressed himself against the cold stone wall of the cave, listening to the wind whistle through the canyon. The echoes of the pursuers had faded, but he knew it was only a matter of time before they returned. Every shadow seemed alive, every gust of wind a warning. Lumber, the hatchling, stirred in his arms, tiny claws brushing his chest. Its scales glimmered faintly, as if reflecting the fear and determination within him. He knew they could not keep running forever. The scavengers, the raiders, whoever they were relentless. Callan had to find a way to turn the chase to their advantage. But first he needed to understand Lumber. The hatchling was not just a creature to protect. There was something extraordinary about it, something humans had long forgotten. He set Lumber on the cave floor and crouched nearby. "I need to know what you can do," he said quietly. The hatchling blinked, watching him with unspoken intelligence. When Callan placed his hands near the glowing scales, a small pulse of energy ran through him, not painful but intense. Lumber hissed, startled, and curled closer. Callan realized that the dragon's energy was alive, almost sentient, reacting to his presence and his intentions. Hours passed as he experimented, slowly guiding the hatchling's movements. A flick of a wing produced a tiny flare of flame, controlled and precise. A stomp of a claw caused a localized shock in the ground, small but noticeable. Callan's mind raced. If they could learn to harness these abilities, they might not just survive, they could fight back. The breakthrough came when a faint humming vibration echoed through the cave walls. Callan instinctively touched Lumber's scales. Energy surged, flowing from the hatchling into his hands. He could feel the pulse, the rhythm of its power. Carefully he guided it, sending the energy outward in a controlled arc. Sparks of light danced along the cave walls, harmless but illuminating the potential within Lumber. Callan realized the truth. This hatchling could manipulate energy, not just produce flame. With training they could create shields, barriers, even project energy over a distance. But doing so required trust and synchronization. Any mistake could injure or kill either of them. His courage would not be enough. He would need patience, intelligence, and absolute focus. The real test arrived unexpectedly. A sudden rumble shook the cave as a group of scavengers found their hiding spot. The sound of mechanical wings and harsh voices filled the tunnels. Callan felt his chest tighten. They had been discovered sooner than expected. There was no time to escape the way they had before. He crouched low, placing a hand on Lumber's back. "We can do this," he whispered. The hatchling hissed softly, sensing his determination. Callan guided Lumber's energy outward. A controlled pulse shot from the little dragon, striking a section of rock that had partially blocked the tunnel. The rocks tumbled, creating a temporary barrier and slowing the pursuers. One of the raiders yelped, retreating as sparks danced across the stone. Callan's heart pounded, but he stayed calm, focusing on the rhythm of Lumber's power. Each pulse required timing, precision, and careful communication. The hatchling responded to his gestures, his voice, even the slightest touch. Together they became more than a human and a dragon. They became a single force of survival and strategy. Once the raiders were temporarily stalled, Callan grabbed Lumber and led him through a narrow vent, barely wide enough for them to pass. The vents twisted and turned, forcing them to move in near darkness. Each step was a test of endurance, but it also allowed Callan to observe the hatchling's instinct. Lumber moved with intelligence, sensing danger, avoiding traps, and responding to his direction. Emerging from the vents into a hidden canyon plateau, Callan allowed himself a moment to breathe. Lumber nuzzled his chest, exhausted but alert. Callan smiled, a flicker of hope breaking through the tension. "You're incredible," he said. "Together we can survive this. And maybe, more than survive." He sat down, running a hand along Lumber's glowing scales. As he did, he noticed something in the distant horizon, a faint shimmer of light reflecting off crystalline rock formations. Memories of old core world texts flooded his mind. Humans and dragons had once worked together, protecting colonies, unlocking hidden energy, even defending planets from fleets of invaders. Could it be true? Could Lumar be the key to something humanity had long forgotten? Callan's pulse quickened. If he could unlock the hatchlings' full potential, they would not only evade their pursuers, they could turn the tide against anyone who threatened them. But to do that, he would need to push the hatchling to test the limits of its abilities, and to risk himself like never before. Every lesson would demand courage, every experiment might cost them dearly. The wind picked up again, carrying a metallic screech across the plateau. Callan stiffened. The pursuers had not given up. They were closing in. Lumar's scales pulsed in response, a warning and a promise. Callan's jaw set. He understood then that survival was only the beginning. To protect the hatchling, to unlock its power, he would have to fight smarter, faster, and braver than anyone had ever expected from a human. He lifted the hatchling, its tiny claws gripping his shirt. "Let's show them what we can do," he said. The little dragon hissed, sparks flickering along its scales. Together, they stepped toward the edge of the plateau, the wind whipping around them, the canyon below promising danger at every turn. Callan knew the next moments would define not just their survival, but the future of the bond between humans and dragons, a bond humanity had forgotten, waiting to be remembered. And somewhere in the distant shadows, the faint hum of wings and the rattle of weapons reminded him, the trials were far from over. The sun dipped below the jagged ridges of Aurelius Prime, casting the canyon in deep shadows. Callan crouched with Lumar on a narrow cliff ledge overlooking the colony. Smoke from distant fires rose in twisted columns, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gray. Vorak Dallas's fleet had arrived, drones and armed mercenaries swarming the ridges like hungry insects. Callan's stomach clenched. There was no way to outrun them this time. He hugged Lumar close, feeling the warmth of the hatchling's glowing scales against his chest. "This is it," he whispered, his voice steady despite the fear. "We fight now or everything is lost." Lumar hissed softly, sparks flickering along its back as if acknowledging the urgency. Callan's mind raced. The canyon offered some cover, but the fleet's drones could hover, scan and fire from any angle. Any misstep could mean death. He scanned the ridges, noting the natural barriers, the clusters of boulders and the geothermal vents that could be leveraged. Every decision had to be precise. He crouched beside Lumar and placed his hands lightly on the hatchling's glowing scales. Energy pulsed through him, warm and alive. "I need you to focus," he said. "We're going to protect the colony together." Lumar blinked, sparks flickering brighter, responding to his concentration. Callan inhaled, aligning his thoughts with the dragons. They had trained for this, but nothing could replicate the pressure of facing an entire fleet. The first wave of drones descended. Metallic wings sliced through the canyon air, lasers crackling toward the settlement. Callan extended his arms toward Lumar, guiding the hatchling's energy. A bright pulse shot from Lumar, striking the canyon walls. Rocks tumbled, creating a jagged barrier, and the first drones crashed into it, sparks flying. Callan ducked, feeling the heat of energy surging through him. Lumar hissed, growing stronger, its wings unfurling slightly as it released another pulse, larger and more focused. The colony below shook under the barrage of Vorak's weapons. Settlers ran for cover, screaming and shouting, but Callan ignored them for the moment. Every second counted. He and Lumar were the colony's shield, and failure was not an option. He guided the hatchling with hand signals and voice, timing each pulse of energy to repel drones and deflect laser fire. Sparks danced along the cliff walls, a chaotic light show of survival. One of the drones broke through the barriers, its targeting systems locking onto the colony's energy grid. Callan's eyes narrowed. If it hit, the settlement would be crippled. He leapt forward, positioning Lumar's energy just in time. The hatchling arched its back, releasing a concentrated wave that slammed into the drone. Metal twisted and sparks flew as the drone exploded, thrown backward into the canyon. Callan stumbled but did not fall, holding Lumar steady against the recoil of its power. Vorak Dallas himself appeared on the ridge, commanding the remaining fleet. His black armor gleamed in the fading light, weapons at the ready. Callan felt a surge of defiance. Fear was still there, but it was sharper now, refined into determination. He would not let this man destroy the colony or take the hatchling. The final assault began. Drones swarmed from all sides, some firing from above, some from narrow canyon paths. Callan counted his options. There was only one chance. He placed his hands fully on Lumar, connecting with its energy core. Pain lanced through him, searing but not enough to break his grip. He whispered, "Now Lumar, give me everything." The hatchling roared, a sound small yet terrifying, and released a massive pulse of energy. It surged outward, forming a dome of shimmering light around the colony. Plasma blasts and missiles struck it, but the energy held. Sparks flew across the dome, arcs of electricity dancing like lightning, and the drones crashed, unable to penetrate the shield. Callan gritted his teeth, feeling Lumar's pulse through him, every beat demanding focus and courage. Then came the critical moment. Vorak fired a concentrated beam, larger than any previous attack, aimed at the heart of the colony. Callan's chest burned as he channeled Lumar's energy directly into a counterpulse. The beam collided with the dome in a flash of light so bright it turned the canyon white. Callan felt every nerve in his body vibrate with energy, pain mingled with exhilaration. Lumar hissed, struggling to maintain focus, but Callan held firm, lending strength to the tiny dragon. Finally, the beam shattered against the dome, scattering into harmless sparks. The fleet faltered, and Vorak, realizing his attacks were futile, began to retreat. Callan collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. Lumar nestled against him, exhausted but unharmed, scales dimming as the pulse faded. The colony below had survived. Settlers emerged from hiding, staring in awe at the man and the tiny dragon who had defended them. Callan's vision blurred, not from the fight but from relief. He had risked everything, his life, his safety, everything, for this hatchling, and together they had done the impossible. He looked down at Lumar, seeing the faint glow of its scales as if acknowledging the victory. They had survived, and in doing so, they had shown that human courage, intelligence, and determination could overcome even the most impossible odds. But Callan knew this was only the beginning. Vorak's retreat would not be the end of their trials. The hatchling was more than a creature to protect. It was a key to something greater, something humanity had forgotten. And if the galaxy had learned of their bond, they would be hunted again, tested again. He lifted Lumar, its tiny claws clutching his shoulder, and whispered, "We did it, but the fight isn't over. Not yet." The hatchling blinked at him, sparks flickering faintly along its wings, a promise of what was to come. Callan's chest tightened with resolve. They had won this battle, but the war for survival, and for the hidden legacy of dragons, was only beginning. And above the canyon, the last echoes of the retreating fleet carried a warning. The galaxy would remember this day, and so would Callan. The canyon was quiet now. Smoke from distant fires had drifted away, leaving the twilight calm and still. Callan sat on a rocky outcrop, Lumar curled against his chest, scales glowing faintly in the dim light. The colony below was safe, its settlers emerging cautiously from hiding, eyes wide with awe and gratitude. For the first time in days, Callan allowed himself to breathe. He had risked everything to protect this tiny creature, and against impossible odds they had survived. But as relief settled in, a deep awareness came over him. This was more than survival. Lumar was not just a hatchling in need of care, it was a key to something humanity had long forgotten. Callan had glimpsed it during their flight through the tunnels, during the pulse experiments, and in the chaotic defense of the colony. There was power here, ancient and intelligent, waiting to awaken. A group of settlers approached cautiously, led by Elda Myron, one of the colony elders. Her gray-streaked hair was tied back, and her eyes held a mixture of fear, reverence, and curiosity. "Callan," she said softly, "you've done what no one thought possible." She gestured to Lumar, now looking calm and almost regal. "This hatchling, it is the last of a line that once walked with humans. Protectors, guides, guardians. And you," her voice faltered then strengthened. "You've awakened something that was lost for centuries." Callan frowned. "Awakened what?" Elda stepped closer, lowering her voice. "A covenant. Long before the core worlds abandoned us, humans and dragons were bound. Protectors were honored, their courage and loyalty recognized. You have fulfilled that role. And by surviving, by defending the hatchling against impossible odds, you've claimed that honor, though it is not spoken, not written, not seen for generations." Callan's heart thumped. Honor had never been his goal. Survival had always been enough. But the weight of the recognition, quiet yet profound, pressed upon him. He looked down at Lumar, who blinked up at him, scales shimmering softly. There was intelligence there, almost sentient understanding. The hatchling had survived because of him, yes, but the bond they shared was mutual. "You mean, we're protectors?" Callan asked, disbelief and awe threading his words. Elda nodded. "Yes. Guardians of the line, of the covenant. Humanity has been tested, but you've reminded the galaxy that courage, intelligence, and compassion are its true strengths." Callan felt a strange warmth, a mixture of pride and humility. The battles, the dangers, the near-death experiences, it had all led to this moment. He had acted out of instinct and empathy, yet the galaxy would remember his choice. His courage had not only saved a life but had reawakened a legacy, forgotten but vital. Lumar stirred, tiny wings fluttering. Callan whispered softly, "We did it, together." The hatchling responded with a small pulse of energy, a gentle glow spreading through the air around them. Callan realized then that this bond was more than protective, it was transformative. He could feel the energy moving around him, subtle and powerful, like a promise that humanity still had a place among the stars, even when all seemed lost. The settlers gathered closer, eyes wide as Lumar's faint glow illuminated their faces. Children reached out cautiously, elders murmuring in wonder. Callan's gaze shifted to the canyon edges where Vorek's fleet had retreated. They might return, others might seek the hatchling, but now humanity had a guide, a bond of courage that could stand against threats far greater than any one colony. Callan stood slowly, holding Lumar carefully. He scanned the horizon, feeling the wind whip across his face. Fear and doubt lingered, but they were outweighed by determination. "We survive and we protect," he said aloud. "No matter what comes next." The hatchling hissed softly in agreement, tiny sparks dancing along its scales. The elder Elda placed a hand on Callan's shoulder. "This honor is yours, though few will understand it. What you've done will inspire the colony and beyond for generations. You've shown that humans, even in the harshest worlds, can rise to meet impossible odds." Callan nodded, looking down at Lumar. There was a quiet understanding between them, an unspoken promise. They would face dangers together, protect the bond that had been rekindled, and ensure that humanity's courage was never forgotten. As the last light of day faded into the stars, Callan allowed himself a rare smile. The hatchling nestled closer, warmth radiating from its small body, and he felt an unshakable sense of purpose. Aurelius Prime had tested him, pushed him to the edge of fear and endurance, but he had survived, and in doing so, awakened a legacy. Humanity, he realized, was not just capable of survival. It was capable of greatness, of heroism, of defying the odds against impossible odds. Callan took a deep breath, feeling the canyon around him, the colony below, and the quiet pulse of energy in Lumar's scales. The galaxy might have forgotten, might have doubted, but here, in this remote and dangerous world, humanity's courage had left its mark. He whispered one last time to the hatchling, "We've done more than survive. We've reminded the galaxy who we are." Lumar's glow pulsed in response, faint but steady, a silent acknowledgement. Callan knew that this was only the beginning. Together they would face whatever came next, guided by courage, intelligence, and an unbreakable bond. And somewhere deep in the canyon, the first stars appeared, shining witness to a human's bravery, a hatchling's trust, and an honor the galaxy had almost forgotten.